What's up, guys? Jay here with Tap and Turn Gaming, coming at you today with another EDH deck tech. My deck tech for today will be for a legendary creature. For any of those of you that saw our Top 10 Tiny Leaders video, you'll know exactly who this creature is. A lot of you probably know who she is anyway. But this isn't a Tiny Leaders deck, this is just a standard EDH deck. But without further ado, my general of this deck is Glissa The Traitor, 3-cost 3/3 with First Strike and Death Touch, so that's pretty awesome on its own. But where she really shines is her secondary ability on her, where basically whenever one of your opponent's creatures dies, you get to take back an artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So this deck really does like to abuse that ability. But like I said, the First Strike Death Touch is pretty sweet too. It basically makes it so that Glissa just obliterates any creature that she goes to combat with. Unless that creature is indestructible or also has First Strike and 3 or higher power, she just basically can't be touched in combat. So that's more or less what Glissa does. She's extremely good in combat, and the fact that she recurs your artifacts whenever your opponent's things die, or your opponent's creatures rather, is pretty sweet. This is actually a deck that I just completed a few days ago, so I figured I'd do a deck tech on it for you guys, and I'm really looking forward to trying this deck out and playing it. So that's my general, Glissa the Traitor. First up, we'll take a look at my land base for this deck. Pretty basic, seeing as it's only a 2-color deck. So first up, we get the duels. We got Overgrown Tomb, we got a Llanowar Wastes, Jungle Hollow, Golgari Rot Farm, Golgari Guildgate, Woodland Cemetery, Giltleaf Palace. You got that Temple of Malady for that scry, which is pretty nice, and Tainted Wood. The next 2 lands, I just felt like they were kind of auto-includes just because they're artifacts and my general recurs artifacts. They're not really necessary in the deck, but I felt like they would just be nice little things to have in the deck, seeing as they're artifacts and my general's all about artifacts. So we get the Vault of Whispers and the Tree of Tales. Next up are my more or less utility lands. We got that Crypt of Agadeem for being able to get lots of black mana to my mana pool, equal to the number of black creatures that I have in my graveyard. Urborg to make every land a swamp. Strip Mine to blow up those pesky lands my opponents may have. Grim Backwoods for some card draw and a sacrifice outlet. Mirror in the Moaning Well for another sacrifice outlet and being able to gain some life. Reliquary Tower for that no maximum hand size. And Bajuka Bog for that graveyard hate. And then the rest I just fill out with basics. I have 10 of each, so 10 basic forests and 10 basic swamps. So that's the land base of this deck. Like I said, pretty basic with it just being black and green, just 2 colors, so nothing too crazy in the land base. Next up, we'll take a look at my artifacts and enchantments. First, we'll take a look at the artifacts, seeing as my general's all about that artifact scene. So first up, we have a pretty nice card in Triangle of War. Costs 1, and you can pay 2 and sacrifice it to basically choose a creature you control and a creature that one of your opponents control, and they essentially fight each other. This is pretty good removal, especially with one of the creatures that I have in the deck, and I'll get to that interaction when I get to that creature later on in the video. But, I mean, being able to drop this down for 1 and then pay 2 and have one of your creatures fight another creature, you know, if the creature has Death Touch or something, you know, no matter how much damage they deal, they're going to kill the opposing creature, and then this will just come right back to your hand if you have your general on the board because one of your opponent's creatures died. So Triangle of War is pretty sweet in this deck. Soul Ring, enough said. Don't need to talk about that. Everybody knows that it's good and everybody plays it. Expedition map for that that land searching, any land. So, you know, I could fetch up my Bojuka Bog or my Urborg or my Strip Mine or whatever. Horizon Spellbomb, basically, you know, mana ramp on a 1-cost artifact that will also cantrip me if I dump a green mana into it when I sacrifice it and it goes to the graveyard. So, reusable mana ramp and card draw is pretty sweet if I have my general out on the board. Nihil Spellbomb, basically with Glissa on the board, it's reusable graveyard hate and another cantrip as well. Executioner's Capsule, this is an all-star in this deck. For any of you that know the synergy of this card and, you know, Glissa, a lot of people like to call Glissa and this card the Doomblade engine. So essentially, you drop this for 1 black, and then you can pay 1 and a black and tap it and sacrifice it to kill a non-black creature. Once that creature dies and goes to the graveyard, that will trigger Glissa's ability, allowing you to take this back from your graveyard to your hand, recast it, and just keep doing it over and over and over. Hence the name, the Doomblade engine. So it's pretty sweet. Cranial Plating, pretty nice card, especially in this deck, running a lot of artifacts. It's an equipment that costs 2 and 1 to equip. Generally, I probably won't ever really be paying the actual equip cost on this, but the equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control, and then the nice part about it is you can pay 2 black to attach it to target creature you control, and you can do that at instant speed, because you're not actually paying the equip cost. You're essentially just freely attaching it to a creature by paying that double black. So, you know, you can be tricky with that in combat. Swing in with something, your opponent declares no blocks, you pay 2 black, attach that to the creature and make them bigger for however many artifacts you have on the board. Lightning Greaves, don't need to talk about that. Everybody knows what that does and everybody knows why it's good. Nim Deathmantle, probably one of the artifact cards that I pretty much put into just about every commander deck that I build. I think it's a very underrated card, and I think it's really good creature recursion. 2-cost equipment, the equipped creature gets +2/+2 Intimidate and is a black zombie. But basically where this card really shines, what I like about it, is whenever one of your creatures dies, you can pay 4 colorless and then essentially bring that creature from the graveyard right back into play, and this automatically gets attached to it. So pretty solid creature recursion if you ask me. Next up is Oblivion Stone. Essentially in this deck it's reusable board wipe. You know, seeing as it's an artifact, I can pay 5, tap it, and sacrifice it to essentially nuke the entire board of every non-land permanent without a fate counter on it. You know, and if I have Glissa on the board, after I wipe the board, her ability will try. I'm pretty sure even though she would also die unless she was indestructible somehow or I had a way to save her, I'm pretty sure her ability would still go on the stack and trigger and let me take this back from my graveyard to my hand. So essentially, you know, reusable board wiping is pretty sweet. Ashnod's Altar, another sack outlet that gets you 2 colorless mana to your mana pool, so that's another artifact that I play in pretty much every commander deck I build. I just like free sack outlets. Darksteel Plate, it itself is indestructible and the equipped creature is indestructible. 3-cost equipment, 2 to equip. Here's a fun card, Nemesis Mask, 3-cost equipment with 3 to equip. All creatures able to block equipped creature do so. So if you slap this on Glissa, you're going to have a fun day. If your opponent has, if she's just got this attached onto her and nothing else, nothing like pumping her, power and toughness or anything like that. If your opponent has more than 3 creatures, then Glissa's gonna die. But, it's just a fun card to throw on her because she's gonna first strike and death touch on up to 3 creatures. So, if your opponent has 3 or less creatures and all their creatures have to block her, you're essentially just gonna kill them all. Let's say your opponent has 3 creatures on the board and you swing in with Glissa with this on her. All of those creatures have to block her, so you could essentially just assign, because she's a 3/3, so you could assign 1 damage to each of those creatures, and she first strikes and death touches, so all those creatures just die. So it's nice. It's a fun little card to play around with her. Here's a Trading Post. Pretty solid artifact. Gives you lots of options. Pay 1, tap it, discard a card to gain 4 life, or pay 1, tap it, pay 1 life, and you get a 0/1 white blocker. Or you can pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice a creature to return target artifact from your graveyard to your hand, so kind of like Glissa's ability a little bit. And pay 1, tap it, sacrifice an artifact to draw a card. So pretty sweet card. Gives you lots of options. Next is Grinning Totem, 4-cost artifact, where you can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to essentially rip out a card from your opponent's library and exile it. And then until your next upkeep, you can play that card. If you don't play it, it goes to their graveyard. This is a pretty cool little card. So you put this down and you sacrifice it. And you can rip out any card from your opponent's graveyard. From their library. So, if you have the appropriate mana to cast whatever card that you rip out of their deck, you can essentially play it and use it against them, which is pretty sweet. If your opponent's not playing black or green, the most this is going to do is just allow you to rip out a card from their deck, exile it, and then it'll just go to their graveyard on your next upkeep. So, it's not bad if you can't actually cast it. You can essentially rip out a card from their deck and make it so they can't use it unless they have some sort of recursion to get it back from their graveyard. But it's a pretty cool card, nonetheless. You can either rip out a card and cast it and use it against them, or rip out a card and dump it in their graveyard on your next upkeep so they can't use it. Here's a Birthing Pod, pretty sweet card. 3 and a Phyrexian green for an artifact, where you can pay 1 and a Phyrexian green and tap it and sacrifice a creature to essentially chain your creatures. So if you sacrifice a 2-cost creature with this, you search your library for a creature that costs 3. So it's the creature's mana cost plus 1. So, like I said, if you have a 2-cost guy and you sacrifice him to this, you search your deck for a 3-cost guy and put him into play. If you sacrifice a 3-cost guy, you search for a 4-cost guy, so on and so on. So it's a pretty cool little utility artifact that lets you chain your creatures. And if you get all the use that you can out of one particular creature, you can sack him to that to get something else on the board that will benefit you. And lastly, Cage Sun, just a mana doubler for whatever color that you choose. And it also gives your creatures of the chosen color +1/+1, and makes it so that if, let's say I call black, all of my black creatures get +1/+1, and all of my lands that tap for black generate an additional black. So, pretty sweet. Alright, so that's my artifact package. Next up, we'll take a look at my enchantments. There's only 5 of them. First up is Palace Siege, basically in there just for some creature recursion if you choose cons on it, which I will probably 100% of the time choose, because being able to get creatures back from your graveyard is pretty nice in Commander. If you do choose dragons at the beginning of your upkeep, each of your opponents loses 2 and you gain 2. Not a bad mode, but I would definitely take the creature recursion over that every single time. So, pretty cool card. Here's Attrition, another sack outlet that allows me to pay a black and sack a guy to destroy a non-black guy. So, pretty nice there. Dictate of Erebos, essentially Grave Pact with Flash. Phyrexian Reclamation, some more creature recursion in a much cheaper form. You can pay 2 and 2 life to get a creature back from your graveyard to your hand. And Aestheticism, 5 cost green enchantment that gives all your creatures hexproof and allows you to regenerate target creature for 1 and a green. So pretty sweet. Alright, so that's my enchantments. Next up, we'll take a look at my spells. Normally I would say instants and sorceries, but going through this deck I realize I have 0 instants in this deck, but that's alright. So here are my sorceries. Black Sun Zenith, essentially just a black sweeper that will get around creatures that are indestructible. So whatever you dump into the X cost, you put that many -1/-1 counters on every creature on the board. And that gets shuffled back into your deck afterwards so that you could potentially use it again at some point. Kadama's Reach and Cultivate, essentially the same exact card. Everybody knows what they do. They let you search for 2 basics, shoot one onto the field tapped and the other in your hand. Diabolic Tutor, search for a card and put it in your hand. And Genesis Wave. If you're playing green, I highly recommend you play this card. This card's bonkers. It's really, really good, and I consider it a green staple. 3 green and X to reveal the top X cards of your deck. Put any number of permanent cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them straight into play, and then the cards that you revealed that didn't go into play go into your graveyard. Amazing card. If you're playing green, play Genesis Wave. Alright, so those are my sorceries. Next we'll look at the 2 Planeswalkers that I run in the deck. First one is Vraska the Unseen. She's pretty cool. 5 cost Planeswalker that comes in with 5 loyalty, so that's pretty nice. More or less I just use her for her -3 ability to destroy target non-land permanent. So, you know, if there's a thing on the board that I can't deal with, you know, she allows me to get rid of it. I do have lots of ways to kill creatures and a few ways to kill artifacts and enchantments, but just being able to kill any permanent that's not a land is nice. But her first ability lets you +1 and essentially make it so that whenever a creature deals damage to her until your next turn, that creature just gets destroyed. So it kind of deters your opponents from wanting to attack into her. And then that -3, destroy target non-land permanent. The last one, -7, I usually never activate this because I think it's kind of gay. But you get 3 1/1 black assassin creature tokens that have an ability that say whenever they deal damage to a player, that player loses the game. I generally never activate that ability because I think it's pretty gay. You know, just losing the game by being hit by a 1/1 token creature is kind of lame, so I generally don't activate that, but more or less I just alternate between the +1 and the -3. You know, if I cast her, I'll probably immediately -3 if I have enough creatures on the board to, you know, block with so I don't lose her, and then I'll, you know, +1, +1, -3, and just keep, you know, alternating between those. So she's pretty cool. I like her. And Garruk Wildspeaker, he's more or less in here just for the +1 of untapping 2 target lands, you know, to get that mana ramp. But being able to -1 to get a 3/3 dude or -4 to get an overrun effect isn't bad either. Generally don't use those too often, or at least I don't see myself using them too often, but at least in this deck. But you know, the option's there if I want it, but more or less I put this in there for the mana acceleration. Okay, so those are my 2 Planeswalkers. Lastly, we'll look at my creature package, which is a pretty hefty portion of it. And quite a few of these creatures are artifact creatures, because my commander likes artifacts. The first two are some mana mirrors, Leaden Mirror and Copper Mirror. The Leaden Mirror taps for a black, the Copper Mirror taps for a green. Just one thing I want to point out about these cards, I love the art on these. Kev Walker is the guy that did the art on these. He's probably my favorite artist in Magic the Gathering, not just because of these cards, but just some of the art on cards that he's done. You know, he's done these. He did all of the mana mirrors from the original Mirrodin block. He did Wrath of God and Damnation. He also has done Hand of Honor and Hand of Cruelty, which are two of my favorite arts that he's done. So I really like Kev Walker's stuff. But, you know, just essentially little mana rocks here that are also 1/1 bodies. So, you know, and they're artifacts, so if they do die, I can get them back with Glissa. So, you know, pretty decent stuff. Next we have Fauna Shaman, basically a survival of the fittest on a 2/2 body, so that's pretty sweet. Lifesmith, whenever I cast an artifact spell I can pay 1, if I do I gain 3 life, so that's pretty cool, and he's a 2/1 body for 2. Mirror Retriever, a 1/1 for 2, when he dies you get an artifact card back from your graveyard to your hand, so kind of like Glissa's ability on a 1/1 artifact body. Burnished Heart, he's really nice. Reusable mana ramp for me in this deck, because with him being an artifact, you know, you can pay 3 and sacrifice him to fetch up 2 basics from your deck, one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand. Oh no, I'm sorry, both of them onto the battlefield tapped, I stand corrected. So, you know, sack this guy, pay 3, sack him, get 2 basics onto the field tapped, and then, you know, if I start killing my opponent's things, which is pretty easy to do in this deck, I can keep getting him back with my general on the board and just ramping out. Pretty sweet. Here's the creature I was talking about that's particularly good with Triangle of War. Let me see if I can just quickly grab that real quick. Okay, so here we get Painsmith. A 2-cost 2/1. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may have target creature get +2/+0 and gain Death Touch until end of turn. So what makes that really good with Triangle of War is if you have this on the board and you cast your Triangle of War for 1, that's going to trigger this creature's ability, allow you to give any creature you want +2/+0 and give it Death Touch. So then you will use the Triangle of War, pay 2, sacrifice it, and use the creature that you just targeted with this, make that creature fight any one of your opponent's creatures, and seeing as it's got Death Touch, it's automatically going to kill that creature that it's basically going to fight. So not only is that going to remove one of your opponent's creatures off the board, but that's also going to trigger your general's ability. Glissa, if you have her on the board, one of your opponent's creatures just died, Triangle of War is going to come back to your hand. So it's a nice little synergy with these two cards in Glissa. Have this on the board, cast this, give a creature +2/+0 Death Touch, sacrifice this, use the creature you just targeted with this to fight one of your opponent's creatures, kill it, get this back, do it over and over again, rinse and repeat. So it's really nice. Eternal Witness, everybody knows what she does. She lets you take any card back from your graveyard to your hand. Moriok Replica, he is essentially a reusable Sign in Blood in this deck. He's a 3-cost 2/2, but you can pay 1 and a black and sack him to draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. And if you have Glissa on the board and you kill one of your opponent's things, you get him back, and you can keep reusing that. So, pretty cool. We got Fleshbag Marauder and Merciless Executioner, essentially the same exact card. When they come into play, everybody sacks a guy. So, more or less, they're just in there to trigger Glissa's ability. Sylvok Replica. reusable artifact and enchantment destruction. You know, a 1/3 for 3 where you can pay a green and sack him to blow up an artifact or enchantment. And obviously, if Glissa's on the board and I kill one of my opponent's creatures, I get him back. Or I can get him back if I like. Yavimaya Elder, basically mana acceleration and card draw on a 2/1 body, so he's pretty nice. Cryptghast, basically a mana doubler for swamps, so he's also got that extort ability, which is, you know, decent, but I mainly just have him in there for the mana doubling on my swamps. Hell's Caretaker, I really like this card. 4 cost 1/1, where you can tap him and sacrifice a creature to resurrect any creature out of your graveyard right back to the battlefield. You can only do that on your upkeep, but you know, you could essentially sacrifice a creature and then target that same creature and bring it right back onto the battlefield to, you know, re-trigger like an enter the battlefield effect or something like that. But he's a really good creature recursion. I like him a lot. Gerard, Golgari Lichlord. He gets +1/+1 for every creature card in your graveyard, so that's pretty cool. Mainly why I have him in here is for his second ability, where you can pay 1, a black and a green, sack another creature. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrifice creature's power. Mainly, I like this because it says each opponent. So if you sacrifice a big guy, if you sacrifice a 10/10, each of your opponents are going to lose 10 life. So it's pretty sweet. He also, one more thing, he also can recur himself by you sacrificing a swamp and a forest. He can come back to your hand from your graveyard by doing that, but I'm not a huge fan, unless I'm playing my Titania deck. Not a huge fan of sacrificing lands away. Here's Reaper of the Wilds. I really like this card. I think it's very underrated. It's a 4/5 for 4, which is pretty cool. Whenever another creature dies, you get to scry 1. Now let's face it, in Commander, creatures are going to die all the time. All the time. So you're constantly going to be able to filter your top card. And then you can pay a black to give this Death Touch, or pay 1 and a green to give it Hexproof. It's a pretty resilient card, I would say. And, that constant top deck manipulation with that Scry 1 is pretty awesome. I really like that card. Here's Indulgent Tormentor. 5/3 for 5 with flying. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card unless target opponent sacrifices a creature or pays 3 life. This is a pretty nice card in this deck. So essentially, with this guy on my upkeep, my opponent's either going to let me draw a card, or they're going to sacrifice one of their creatures and trigger my commander's ability, or they're going to lose 3 life. So, I mean, all 3 of those things just, net me value. The pays 3 life, I could see people doing that, quite a few times, just to not lose a guy and not to let me draw a card. But, you're not going to pay 3 life, 10 times, because you just lost, 75% of your life right there. So, it's just a really good card. You're either going to let me draw, you're going to trigger my commander's ability, or you're going to make yourself closer to being dead. So, pretty sweet card, I would say. Soul of Innistrad, 6 cost, 6/6 with Death Touch, that lets you take back 3 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand by paying 3 and 2 black. And then if he is in your graveyard, you can pay that same cost and exile him from your graveyard to get that same effect. So he's pretty nice. He's more or less in there to recur creatures for me. Solemn Simulacrum, mana ramp and card draw. Everybody knows him. Everybody loves him. The sad robot. Acidic Slime, everybody knows what this does. It's a green staple. 2/2 with Death Touch that blows up an artifact, enchantment, or land when it comes to play. Like I said, everybody plays that in green. So, Sidisi Undead Vizier, New card from Dragons of Tarkir that I really, really like. A 4/6 for 5 with Death Touch is pretty nice. It also has that new ability, Exploit. When it comes into play, you can sacrifice a creature. And if you exploit a creature with this, you basically demonic tutor. So, pretty sweet. Ocher Slumlord, a 3/3 for 5. Whenever another non-token creature dies, you get a 1/1 black rat creature token onto the field. And rats you control have Death Touch, so basically every time one of my opponent's things dies, or even if it's my thing and it dies, any non-token creature, I essentially get a little miniature kill spell out of it, basically. So, he's pretty cool. Here's Vulture Zombie, a 3/3 for 5 that gets a +1/+1 counter every time a card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere. So he can get very, very big very, very quickly. And I've seen this guy be like, you know, like a 30/30 before. So he's no joke. He can get real big real fast. Here's Duplicant, a 2/4 for 6 that allows you to exile a non-token creature when he enters the battlefield, and as long as that card is a creature card, Duplicant has that card's power, toughness, and creature types, and it's still a shapeshifter. Doesn't really truly become a copy of it, doesn't like gain its abilities and stuff like that. But just being able to exile any creature off the board is pretty nice. And with it being an artifact, if I lose it or if I sacrifice it to like a trading post or something, I can potentially get it back with my general and exile something else with it. Archetype of Finality, a 2/3 for 6. It gives all my creatures Death Touch, so that's pretty nice. And makes it so that your opponent creatures your opponents control lose Death Touch and can't have or gain Death Touch. So that's secondary ability. You know, it might be relevant in corner case scenarios, but I just like this because it gives all of my creatures Death Touch. That's pretty nice. Speaking of Death Touch, here's Grave Titan, 6 cost 6/6 with Death Touch that just spits out 2/2 zombie tokens like it's going out of style. This guy is just a token generating machine. When he comes in, you get 2/2 black zombies, and every time he attacks, you get the same thing. He's very, very nice. Harvester of Souls, a 5/5 for 6 with Death Touch. Death Touch again. And whenever another non-token creature dies, you may draw a card. This guy is just straight up pure card advantage. If you're playing black, I suggest you play this guy. He'll draw you cards. Worm Coil Engine. Everybody knows what this guy does. He death touches and lifelinks, and when he dies, he gets replaced by a 3/3 with lifelink and a 3/3 with Death Touch. So he's very nice as well. Here's Sheoldred, Whispering One, a 6/6 for 7 with Swamp Walk that resurrects a creature out of your graveyard right into play on your upkeep, and on each of your opponent's upkeeps they have to sacrifice a guy. So on my turn I get a guy out of the yard into play. On my opponent's turns, on their upkeep, they trigger my commander's ability by sacrificing a guy. Here's Steel Hellkite. This guy's really good. 5/5 for 6 with flying. You can give him fire breathing for 2, or the ability that I usually always activate is his second one, where you can pay X and destroy each non-land permanent with converted mana cost X whose controller was dealt damage by him this turn. So, you know, if your opponent has some sort of problem permanent on the board that you can't deal with, you swing it with this guy. If you hit with him, whatever that permanent's mana cost is, you pay that for X, and you get to destroy that permanent and every other permanent that's not a land that they have with the same cost. So, very, very nice. And lastly, Soul of New Phyrexia, a 6/6 for 6 with Trample. that lets you pay 5 and give all your permanents indestructible till end of turn, and then if he's in your graveyard, you can exile him and pay that same cost to get that same effect. And with him being an artifact, he's easily recurable with Glissa. So he's pretty menacing. Being able to give your entire board indestructible until end of turn. I mean, it's 5 mana, but that's a pretty good investment. 5 mana to make all your stuff indestructible. Very nice. Alright, so that's it. That is my Glissa the Traitor EDH deck tech. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, throw out a like and a comment in the comment section. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, please do so. We really do appreciate it when you guys subscribe to the channel, so you're notified each and every time we upload a new video. So let me know what you think of my deck. You know, if there's any cards that you would replace that are currently in it, if you would replace it with something different, or if you think I did a pretty spot-on job with this build, let me know. I really like to hear your suggestions and your thoughts on my deck. So yeah, just throw me out some comments in the comments section below. Yeah, that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. This has been Jay with Tap and Turn Gaming, and we'll catch you later. Thanks a lot for watching the video, guys.